And now for our next speaker, it is Mr. Jason Sung-Soo Jin. And Mr. Jin is in charge of investment at the Africa Development Bank, and he is an investment analyst specializing in East Africa power plants, new and renewable energy, and water. So please welcome Mr. Jin with a big hand.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jason working for Africa Development Bank. Actually, first of all, I really appreciate that I have a great chance to represent about the bank at the conference here. Honestly, I'm not a specialist in this area, so I will mainly focus on the general introduction of the Africa Development Bank. So today I will present about the AFDB, Africa Development Bank general introductions, and how the Africa Development Bank is cooperating with the Korea, and the explaining way how to work with Africa Development Bank. As you can see that graph. So given the severe economic global environment in the world, the Africa development actually is going well comparing to the developed country. Actually, Africa has much potentials for everywhere, including the geospatial area as well. So the main objective of the Africa Development Bank is to help the Africa country is available to get the sustainable economic development and social progress. And the main purpose is to reduce the poverty rate. So the Africa Development Bank was established in 1964. So we have three main financing windows. The first one is the Africa Development Bank, and this one is we call the financing window. And the second is the Africa Development Fund and Nigeria Trust Fund. So currently our member country is 18 countries. So 54 the regional African countries and 26 non-regional member countries. Based on the strong support from our member countries, the Africa Development Bank is keeping the AAA credit rating with 105 billion the capital. So we have a $9 billion private sector portfolio in the continent. So I understand following the World Bank, we have largely operated in the Africa continent and a huge portfolio in the continent. So as I mentioned, we have three financing windows. The first one is the Africa Development Bank. It's established in 1964 when the bank was established. This financing window has a sustainable financing mechanism, so we can raise capital in the capital market through issuing the capital bond. So through this financing window, we can finance to the middle-income countries and the private sector. And second one is the Africa Development Fund. So this fund is mainly concessional financing or grants to the low-income countries. So this fund actually has been replenished every 3 years by the mainly non-regional member country. So Korea actually plays a main role in providing the capitals to the Africa Development Fund every 3 years. And third one is the Nigeria Trust Fund. Nigeria is the biggest shareholder in the Africa Development Bank, so they set up the Nigeria Trust Fund, and then they can help us to operate in the continent more efficiently, more comfortably. So actually, the Africa Development Bank operations is largely categorized in two sectors. One is the public sector and one is the private sector. So it's like a World Bank. The private sector is a similar role in the World Bank, and the private sector is like a IFC. In the public sectors, we have some criteria to categorize the country into the middle income and the low income and blended countries. So as you can see this map, the 18 blue colored countries classified to the middle income countries, including the Tunis and South Africa. So these countries actually can access to the only Africa Development Bank. So actually, it's not a 100% concessional loan. It's financing term is based on the 6 months LIBOR plus some margin, but it's very helpful for the middle income countries in Africa to develop the basic infrastructure. And the yellow colored countries is we classify the low income countries, including Ethiopia. So they can access the Africa Development Fund. So Africa Development Funds is providing grants and very low concessional loans to the countries. So like 15 years tenors and less than 1% interest rate. And the red colored countries called blend countries, they can access the Africa Development Bank and Africa Development Fund as well. So this country including the Kenya and Tanzania as well. In private sector, there is no country limitations. So in private sector registered in the low-income countries, they can get finance from the private sector window in subject to meet our bank's standard criteria like credit rating and additional development outcome and environmental and social criteria. Let me introduce our operation priority. So we call the high five is for the transforming Africa. So we selected 5 main priority operation area in the continent. So first one is the Power Africa. So the main objective is to get the universal access, electricity access by 2025. So this Power Africa is covering the all energy and electricity sectors, including the renewable energy and the generations, transmissions, distributions, and the climate change as well. And second agenda is Feed Africa. It's covering the all value chain in the agriculture sector. Is farming and food processing and all kind of agriculture activity included in this agenda. And third one is the industrialized Africa. So this is including the private sector development and financial sector development and transport and urban development. So the urban development is included in this agenda. So the bank recently established the urban development divisions. So they are now in progress to make a strategy and to expand some the operations in the continent. The first agenda is Integrate Africa. So normally they are dealing with the regional projects such as regional interconnections between some countries and the regional power pool and corridor across the several areas. The last agenda is improve the quality of life. Is covering the health and the educations and all kind of activities to help the quality of life in the African countries. So second chapter is related to the cooperations with Korea. Besides the main financing window I mentioned in the bank, we are trying to mobilize more finance to help the African countries. So as you can see, there are main financing, co-financing window. First one is the EU investment facility. So this one is one of the main co-financing windows we can use. So if there is a financing gaps, we are trying to do the finance. So the EU investment facility is normally providing some to fill the financing gap, and they are trying to provide technical assistance for the project as well. And Japan is very active in the bank, so they have a huge amount of the co-financing window and the trust fund. The China recently set up the Africa Growing Together Fund. Its amount is a $2 billion US. So they want to participate in the African projects we are developing. So they normally fill up the financing gaps whenever Africa Development Bank needs. And AFD, the French agents, is always our co-financing window. And then Korea is the one of the active co-financier. So Korea have EDCF is managed by the Exim Bank. So they are very actively co-financing the all across of the sector, energy and ICT and water and agriculture. And also South Korea set up the trust fund, so they can help providing technical assistance and capacity building and this kind of a grant to the African countries. So Korea joined the Africa Development Bank in 1982. So as I mentioned, the Korea very actively participated in the Africa development replacement every 3 years. So our the Korean government's contributions has been increased every 3 years. And the Korean government set up the KOAFAC. So they have held a finance ministry level meeting regularly, and then they set up the trust fund to provide the technical assistance grants and capacity building grants and the feasibility study, and they are trying to help the project to set up in the early stage, and the policy advisory and framework and all kind of the activities. And as I mentioned, the EDCF is one of our co-financing window. So recently, the Africa Development Bank has approved a transmission line in Tanzania that the co-financier is the EDCF. And this year is a very special year for the Korea. So Korea held the Africa Development Bank's annual meeting in Busan this May. So many ministries and many African governor and senior management in Africa Development Bank visited Busan. So Korean government actually announced the 5 billion financing packages to help the Africa's development going forward. So this picture actually, the guy is a president from the Africa Development Bank. So they made some agreement to co-finance for the $5 billion for the Africa Development infrastructure projects across the ICT included, and energy and water and agriculture and all kind of the sector. So now I would like to introduce how the Africa Development Bank works, and then how the company and government can work with the Africa Development Bank. As I mentioned, so we have largely two sectors we call the public sector and private sector. In the public sector, we are normally providing loan and line of credit and grants to the countries, normally to the Ministry of Finance. So once we receive the finance request from the Ministry of Finance or National Treasury, we are able to start our internal process. So this public sector loan is based on the sovereign guarantee. However, in private sector, we are providing various financing products to the private sector players without the sovereign guarantee. So we call the non-sovereign operations. So we can provide our financing product to the private sector or the government-owned public entities without any sovereign guarantee. So Let me briefly introduce our appraisal process. So as I mentioned, so once we receive the financial request from the government, or in case of the private sector, normally we receive the financial proposal from the private sector, and then we can start our process. So after the pre-evaluation of the project, we are normally the bank is making the project appraisal team, which is composed of the many specialists. So normally the sector expert is leading the project as a task manager, and then there is a credit officer or a financial analyst to assess the commercial viability of the project. So if the project has a financially sustainable or not. And the economists actually in charge of the evaluating development outcome and additionality. So they are making the development outcome notes to present. And the environmental and social expert also participated in the project appraisal process. So they are normally evaluating the environmental and social rights, and then they have obligations to disclose the environmental and social rights in public. And there is a procurement specialist also participated in, and the legal officer also participated in the appraisal process. So they are reviewing the all contract and the term sheet. Besides these officers, we also have a gender specialist, on climate change of specialists, and treasury specialists, etc., based on the project needs. So after the all due diligence from the all specialists, we can get the board approval. Actually, the board approval is made by the board members, as I mentioned. So they have some make decisions if this project is in line with our bank's strategy or not. So after our disbursement, actually we are having a systems to supervise the quarterly to monitor the status of the project, and then sometimes we are intervene to solve some bottleneck and some problem to complete the project. And then after the completion of the project, we are normally making a project completion report to get the lesson learned for the next project. In terms of the public sector project, it's like a World Bank and IDB. We are normally providing the investment for the basic infrastructure and providing policy advice and technical assistance. So main criteria is that the first one is the alignment. So maybe once we receive the financial request, we are normally see if this project is in line with the country's master plan or sector master plan, sector strategies. And also the bank's strategy and the bank's country strategy paper. So we can see this project has a priority in the countries or not. And then we are normally checking the readiness. So the feasibility study is well made, and then the government has a willing to implement this project this year or next year, and something like that. And if there is some financing gap, so we are also checking the status of a co-financier. So the resource in the co-financier is available this year or next year, or so we try to align with other co-financiers to make a financing more efficiently. And as I mentioned, in terms of the portfolio management, we are doing the supervision and completion report. In non-sovereign, in the private sector, actually, it's more complicated than the public sector. We have many criteria to see and to evaluate. So first, the eligible criteria is that the private sector company should be located in the regional member countries. So maybe if there is a Asian company or European companies, if they register in the Africa regions we can consider to finance. And the enterprise and project must be majority owned by the private sector, and also the public-owned entity, but they should have a strong financial sustainability to operate without any subsidy from the government. So normally the project or the corporate loan actually is strongly related to the capex oriented, so we can consider. And in order to encourage other co-financiers to participate in the Africa project, so we have a maximum investment of 1/3 of the total project. So main investment criteria in the private sector, as I mentioned, strategic alignment is also important thing. And it's like a commercial bank, we are evaluating the commercial viability. So if the project or corporate can generate the enough cash flows to repay our loan and our equity. Unlike the commercial bank, one of the factors we are evaluating is the development outcome and additionality. So in the project or in corporate loan or some equity investment, normally we are always doing evaluations, how this project impact on the society and all stakeholders in the country. So the job creations and how much the tax will be generated by this project, and then how much is the benefit and cost of the economic and social performance. And we are also evaluating the additionality. So normally, so if the project cannot get finance for long term from the commercial bank, so we are very happy to provide our financing product to them. So our main advantage of the private sector financing window is the long term. It's up to 15 years. And we can also bring the technical assistant to have a good project. So this is our finance product. So as you might know, the senior debt is a traditional way. So the tenor is up to 15 years, and then including 5 years grace period. And we are providing foreign and local currency as well. So we are providing the ceiling in Tanzania and land in South Africa, Naira in Nigeria, and we can provide some local currency in some countries. And this one is one of our advantage. And we also, like MIGA in World Bank, we have a guarantee, partial risk guarantee and partial credit guarantee over the political risk. And we also providing subordinated debt and equity investment and line of credit. So for the SME, so we are normally providing line of credit to the regional commercial bank to lend at the low interest rates to the SME. And for the small project, we are investing the private equity fund to provide the equity in the small project and the early stage. Also, technical assistance is one of our financial products in the private sector window. So this technical assistance is a help for capacity building and SME linkage program and advisory services. So, so if you have any inquiries and questions, please let me know anytime. And you can find more information about the Korean partnership and the procurement and private sector in our website. So whenever you have any questions, you can find more information in our website. Okay, thank you.